My name is Andrew Clark. I'm from practice building, and I've spent the last 7 years or so working with practice building in the optical industry. Prior to that, however, and at the same time as doing that, I have also found my place in the world as an ecologist and an independent filmmaker. And I'm really excited to talk to you about sustainability today, but I fully appreciate that you might not be that excited to hear me talk about sustainability. Indeed, there's not that many of you here. It seems that most people aren't that excited about sustainability. So first of all, thank you all for coming. But because of that, I'm not actually going to talk about sustainability today. I'm going to talk about saving the f***ing world, which is, in my humble opinion, somewhat more exciting. So if you're aware of anybody at 100% who might be disinterested in sustainability, but might be a little bit more enthusiastic about saving the world, give them a call, send them a tweet or something, invite them to come over. I'll give you a moment. They're welcome at any time. So here's the world. She's in a horrible old state, poor girl. And so that we're all on the same page, I'm just going to give you a quick recap as to what's going on the world before I tell you about what we're doing at practice building and with our partners. So there's Earth, and with my interest in ecology, I'm interested in the whole thing. So when I was going through my couple of degrees, I met lots and lots of people who were really passionate about a specific type of animal, a specific taxa. I never got into that. I wanted to know how they all fit together. And what really moves me is the fact that no organism on Earth exists in isolation. Every single little critter, every plant and animal, every fungi and all the rest of them exists within an ecosystem, which itself exists within a broader ecosystem, which itself exists within a broader ecosystem still, which itself exists within the entire biosphere that we call home, indeed the only known life in 13.8 billion light years in any direction. And that means that everything matters. Everything in its life, in its brief existence, has recursive impacts throughout the entire global system. Everything matters. Everything you do here today matters. Everything has a carbon footprint. Everything comes back to climate change. And that's what moves me to my very core. Now, climate change, you'll have heard a lot about, I hope, in the last few years. But a recap on that. It's being driven by 3 main greenhouse gases. Can anybody here tell me what they are? Shout them out! Carbon dioxide, good man. There are a couple more, lesser well known. I'll give them to you. Methane, thank you! Shout methane, why not shout methane? And nitrous oxide. Now, they're primarily produced as a result of the combustion of fossil fuels and other things. And they are produced in different quantities, and they have different potencies in how severely they cause the greenhouse effect. But carbon dioxide is the most abundant. It's the one that we hear the most about. And when we do some carbon footprinting with clients, we express your total carbon footprint as a carbon dioxide equivalent figure. Because that's what it sort of makes sense as. And those gases combined are causing a gradual heating of the world, global warming. How much heating, I hear you ask? Well, that's what's yet to be decided. Because the best and brightest scientists in the world have put forward a number of possible future scenarios, ranging from 1.5 being a terribly optimistic target to in excess of 4 degrees, and then all hell breaks loose. And a few years ago at Paris, world leaders got together and they agreed that 1.5 would be a reasonable target to set. They reckon that was achievable. We'll limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. 2 degrees at a push, they sort of said. Now for context, at that time when they made that decision, we just passed 1 degree of warming. And here in 2023, we're at 1.2. But warming doesn't sound that bad. Warming sounds quite nice. Indeed, I'm a little chilly today. I would like to be 1.5 degrees warmer. But on a planetary scale, that has tremendous consequences. And again, I'm going to give you a quick recap of what they all are. And I'm going to start at the North Pole. So, up at the North Pole is of course like the poster child of global warming. It has been for my entire life. And what's happened to the North Pole? It's melting. Everybody kind of knows that. You may not know that on its current trajectory of melting, there's due to be no sea ice left at the North Pole in summer by 2035. And that statistic is admittedly a few years old. And the frustrating thing with the statistics on this in the climate science is that every time the IPCC and their very clever peers get together and they reanalyze the data and they present new targets, everything just gets a bit worse. It turns out that they were overly conservative before, and things are just happening a bit faster than they thought they would, or that we would really like them to. So the North Pole is quite quickly melting, and that's rubbish from a climate perspective, because the North Pole has historically been the Earth's ally in maintaining a nice stable climate, because it's this great big expanse of nice reflecty white ice, bouncing solar radiation back off into space and helping to keep the planet cool. Now if you gradually reduce the size of that nice reflecty white ice and replace it in time entirely with a great dark absorbent mass of ocean, the situation flips completely on its head, and it stops being an ally in the fight against climate change and starts being an enemy, absorbing excessive amounts of solar heat. This is a really cheerful subject. Moving down the Earth a little bit, you get to the Arctic tundra. And that's this huge, largely frozen mass of land. You've got Greenland there, which is a great big ice cap. And throughout the rest of like Russia and Canada, you've got the tundra, which is largely peat bogs. And I have a real soft spot for peat bogs. I'm a peat freak. Now, peat is an amazing ecosystem. It's absolutely fantastic. Pound for pound, stores more carbon than rainforests. And when you have a nice healthy peat bog, like we used to in the UK, it's a tremendous sink of carbon. It's made primarily of this wonderful moss called sphagnum moss, and it sucks carbon dioxide out of the air. And being a healthy peat ecosystem, it's fundamentally very wet. And that prevents the decay of plant matter. So it just gets stored as carbon. It builds up and builds up and builds up over millennia. And yet it creates a little bit of methane while it's a healthy peat bog, but that's more than offset by the amount of carbon dioxide that it draws from the atmosphere. So peat bogs are great, unless you drain them, like we did here in the UK a couple of decades ago, and then the situation flips on its head, and they start becoming a tremendous source of greenhouse gases. And in 2019, researchers put a number on this for the first time ever, and it was found that the UK's degraded peatlands alone were a source of 20 million tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent a year. And to put that into context of what that means to any of you, that's the same as undermining half of our national annual efforts to reduce emissions from all of the sources. So every effort you made in 2019 to reduce your carbon footprint and become more sustainable, half of it was wiped out by the state of the UK's peat bogs. Now I found that quite appalling, as did many other people, and I made this really cool little film called The Carbon Farmer that I'm very proud to say helped to change national policy, and peat bogs are now a fundamental cornerstone of British or of UK climate policy. But back up here in the tundra, there's a huge expanse of frozen peatland with a lot of methane trapped below it. And as that frozen environment melts, that methane is steadily released into the atmosphere quite terrifyingly quickly. And methane is the most potent of the greenhouse gases, so it has a very severe effect on climate in a very short amount of time. And for the last few summers, not only has that environment been melting, it's been actively on fire. That should cause some concern. Meanwhile, Greenland, slowly melting. It's a huge amount of ice on an island, and that's trickling fresh water, cold fresh water into the sea, disrupting oceanic currents. And particularly one that's of note to us here in the UK is the Gulf Stream, which travels roughly that direction. And that keeps us a nice, pleasant, temperate isle. That influx of cold water from Greenland is essentially switching that off, leading to, I was going to say future, but really now it's happening. We're already seeing the effects of this. We're getting increased severe weather events like droughts and flooding, and that's only going to get worse. Most of Earth's weather systems that we experience here on land are fundamentally controlled by oceanic systems. So the more that oceanic currents get messed up by changing temperatures in water and air, the more we feel it here on land. Now, the ocean overall is historically an ally in the fight against climate change. It's one of Earth's self-regulatory systems. And the ocean, as a great big body of water, helps sequester carbon in two main ways. One, it's full of algae and plant life, and they photosynthesize and they take carbon out of the atmosphere, it enters the food chain, and then it's gradually deposited into the depths of the ocean over a large period of time. And that's grand. That's grand. The other way that the ocean sequesters carbon is it just dissolves carbon dioxide from the atmosphere into the water. And that is an inherent process about water and carbon dioxide in the air. And that will continue to happen for the next couple of hundred years at a very slow rate. Even if we stopped all our emissions now, the ocean will keep sucking carbon out of the atmosphere for us. That may sound like a good thing. Unfortunately, when you dissolve carbon dioxide into the ocean, it quickly becomes carbonic acid, and that slightly changes the pH of the ocean. Now, if there's anybody here who does anything with contact lenses or eyes, you might be able to attest that to some organic systems, a slight change in pH can be quite severe to an organism. And that is very much the case with oceanic life, particularly anything that has an exoskeleton, particularly if it's made of calcium carbonate, but not exclusively. So I'm talking about corals are the big one, then we've got starfish, we've got urchins, crabs and lobsters. The chemistry of their exoskeletons is very sensitive to pH, and with gradual reduction in pH, it can no longer maintain itself as a solid and as calcium carbonate, meaning that with ocean acidification, those animals will simply dissolve. And because of the way that this process is locked in, that's probably going to happen around 2050. That's just inevitable. That huge amount of species will just dissolve. Which sucks for humans, right? Sucks for humans who depend on those ecosystems for their livelihoods, for their food. And that's just meanwhile, we're having huge, huge changes to land. The areas of the Earth that are currently just about habitable will in the next couple of decades become tremendously uninhabitable as the changes to climatic systems and weather cause increased severe weather events leading to severe desertification of basically anywhere that's currently yellow. That in itself is going to force a mass migration of humanity from the unlivable zone in the middle through to the more temperate areas like where we are. Unfortunately, us in the more temperate areas are still going to be experiencing those severe weather events like floods and droughts. And just last year, I broke my no-fly rule and I went to Rome for my father-in-law's 60th birthday. And it was that week last summer where Rome, or Italy, was experiencing a really severe heat wave. It was a week before that killer heat wave came to the UK. And it was hot in Rome. It was a bit unpleasant, but it wasn't the end of the world. Meanwhile, in northern Italy, their main rivers had dried up, leading to a complete failure in the wheat crop, meaning that there was a pasta shortage in Italy. And that sounds like it's a silly headline, but it was reality. So, within the next 100 years, humans being humans, there will be wars fought for food and water security. Nothing more complicated than that, but the fundamentals of a human existence. In short, it's not a pretty picture. So a few years ago, when global leaders got together and they set the 1.5 degree target, they set 2050 as the target at which we all need to achieve a global net zero carbon emissions. And that was based on a good amount of ambition. In order to meet that target of 1.5 and to have achieved a global net zero by 2050, that required quite rapid reductions in our greenhouse gas emissions. And that has simply not happened. Global emissions are still on the rise, meaning that world leaders have demonstrably failed us. It is now up to people like you and I to do what we need to do to stand a chance of surviving the next 100 years. The problem with the 2050 deadline is that it can lead you to believe that you've got until 2050 to do anything. It's like whenever you set an exam at school, an essay at school, and you're given a deadline, most people interpret that deadline as the day that you do the essay, not the day that it's nice and all tidied up and you start doing the essay as soon as it's set. Maybe it's an inherent human thing. People are treating 2050 like in the same way as an essay, and it cannot be treated that way. But it will allow people it causes people to think, oh, what will I be doing in 30 years? When the question they need to be asking themselves is, will you still be here in 30 years? And maybe each of us as individuals will or won't be, we don't know where life will take us, but there are business leaders here today who need to be asking the question, will your business still be here in 30 years? Most of us are here in a business context today. Considering now what the next few decades are going to be is fundamental for your business. You need to ask the question of whether your business will be able to weather the coming storm, literally and metaphorically. And leaders, business leaders around the world in a myriad of industries are recognizing this and taking action already and adopting sustainable business models. Models that are not just here to exploit as much profit in the short term as they can, but models that will ensure the survival of their business and their employees and their supply chain for the next 30, 40, 50, 100 years. Quick definition of sustainability so that we all know what it's like and so that people don't necessarily feel too threatened by the concept. Sustainability is defined as meeting the needs of today while without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. So what that really means in a business context is it's not necessarily threatening. You can do what you want as long as you don't impact the ability of future generations. As long as you don't prevent anybody else from meeting what they fundamentally need to survive, go for it as a business. That's brilliant. So now a sustainable business model is one that is guided by science, crucially. There's plenty of science out there. One that is responsive to science and to changes in legislation whenever they come, and to consumer trends. One that appreciates its social and environmental impact and leaves no negative impact on the world, apart obviously from carbon. And the cool thing is, from a business perspective, people love this year. This is one of the most growing trends in consumer interests, is the demonstration of business ethics. To demonstrate that your business has sustainability at its heart, that it cares about its people and the planet on which they reside. There is a stronger business argument than ever for going green, but I'm not going to lie to you, that's not why I'm here. I'm also not the one at Practice Building with the business degree. Go and talk to the rest of them on the stand if you want to talk the business side of sustainability. I'm just the eco-nut. So I'm the one who's going to tell you that it sucks, because sustainability is fundamentally at odds with consumerism and unlimited economic growth, because that was a myth we existed in for a while, but we have now reached the limits of the biosphere in which we've done our growing. Fundamentally what this means is the world that any of us know is going to be completely turned upside down in the next 30 years. Wherever we exist within the industry, in the supply chain, how we source materials, how they're delivered through manufacturing, how the markets interact with each other, consumer trends, the weather outside on a day-to-day basis is going to be completely different by 2050 to what it is today. And that's where you have a say. That's the decision you have the opportunity to make today as to whether or not you want to be a part of that change, and you want to take action now to create a world that you're happy to change into, indeed enthusiastic and incited by the opportunity to change the way the world is, or you will be dragged painfully, kicking and screaming, into a reality that frankly none of us want. The irony is that it's the life that we all like to live that has caused this problem, and it's the life that we all like to live that is threatened by this problem. And if I were to leave it there, it would seem horribly depressing, frankly insurmountable, when everything that we know and love is threatened and causing the problem. Here's the good news. It's quite easy to get a handle on it. It's very, very easy to put a carbon footprint on any one of those things. And even in the most decadent of scenarios in which you continue to consume these things, they're all really, really easy and cheap to offset. And I say the most decadent scenarios because the ideal is you start to reduce your carbon footprint, but if you won't or can't, offset it instead. Do what you want, but clean up after yourselves. And that's something that we're doing with internationally verified and accredited schemes that build truly sustainable societies that will weather the next 30 years. Now, here's the killer question. What's the carbon footprint of a pair of glasses? Does anybody know? If you happen to speak to somebody over the next day and a half who claims that they do know, please let me know. Because as far as I'm aware, no bugger knows. So I've had to do some maths myself. And I've done some fairly good maths. I will blow my own trumpet to say it's fairly good maths, but it's not the best maths you could possibly do. I don't have the luxury of time to do another thesis. But I will do over the next couple of years. I've needed to get a number now. So I have worked out that the carbon footprint of your average pair of specs is about 150, 250 grams of carbon. That's tiny. But we need a better figure on that. Because as an industry, the number of glasses we all sell as an industry adds up. Tiny little increments do add up. So I'm going to give you a sneak preview of the carbon accounting that I'm going to be doing in the next couple of years, of how this will underpin everything. And oh, is it exciting? There are two main ways that you can carbon footprint anything, and it's really easy if you're just doing the carbon footprint of somebody driving in an average car from A to B. It is more complicated if you're carbon footprinting a product that is made in 9 different locations around the world. But there are two main ways to do it. One is the life cycle assessment. Life cycle assessment is the ideal way of creating a carbon footprint, because you look at every single step in a supply chain in minute detail. You say, right, so this product was delivered to me via this type of truck, and this is the fuel emissions from that, and then it came from this factory, and the factory used this much energy to create this thing, but the factory itself has a carbon footprint of this much because it's made of carbon and of concrete and steel, and it was constructed by this many people, all of whom drove Range Rovers, and you can never stop. A full life cycle assessment for carbon is as close to literally infinite as you can get. You'd end up carbon footprinting the entire industrial revolution and then some. If I were to express it graphically, it would look like this for a small amount of time before it was just a scribble. The other option is an environmentally extended input-output analysis, EEIOA. And that doesn't go into quite the same amount of detail. That uses economic value as a proxy for carbon footprint. It says, yeah, this industry, this product has a value of this much. We'll use money because we're good at counting money, and we'll use that as a proxy. And by contrast, that just looks as simple as that. So that can all seem desperately overwhelming. Frankly, if that were tasked to any individual, I don't know how we'd ever get anything done. And that is compounded, the feeling of overwhelm is compounded grossly when you reflect on the urgency that we have to act. Because we don't really have the luxury of time when the scientists keep putting out new research papers that demonstrate things like we must pass peak global emissions by 2025 to achieve a livable future for humanity. So that's going along the lines that global emissions are still going up. We have 2 years to get them to start coming down again, or basically all hope is lost. And we're going to pass key global tipping points in the next couple of decades. And one that I didn't mention earlier when I had the map of the Earth up, this research was published just earlier this year. A great group of researchers have demonstrated that 1.5 degree warming target is not just a convenient political number. That is the threshold, the physical boundary on which the Greenland and West Antarctic ice caps depend. Beyond that boundary, they will pass their ability to self-regulate, as many of Earth's systems do, and will just melt, leading to a 10-meter global sea level rise. Which is really shit for the town in East Yorkshire that I just moved to, that's 2.5 meters above current sea level. And it's shit for many other people too. So we have no time to wait. But what I've just laid out for you, in the magnitude of what we have to do and the tiny window of time to do it, is frankly a recipe for inaction. That's partly why, as a global community, we have failed to do anything to date, because it seems so overwhelming and so frantic when you think about it. It's paralyzing. When frankly, action is all that matters. We don't have time for it to be perfect. As one of the leading thinkers on climate science in the UK states, it is far better to be roughly wrong than precisely right in what we're doing now. We've just got to do something. And many of you may be thinking, Andy, this is heavy. Yeah, it is. When the odds seem so tremendously against us, you may ask, why would we do anything? To me, it's like CPR, right? So until I moved to the doomed town in Yorkshire, I lived on Anglesey in North Wales, and I was a volunteer with a local lifeboat there. And with a lifeboat, you're given a basic casualty care proficiency. CPR is one of the things that you're trained how to do, but I'm not a first aid qualified person. If anybody collapses, please don't come and find me. Go to a proper medical representative. But we're all aware that at some point you'll have to do CPR on somebody, or at least you will be given the opportunity to do CPR on somebody. There will be somebody before you needing CPR, in that they have no pulse, they've stopped breathing. Does anybody know the success rate of CPR when performed outside a hospital? 12%. Thank you, Rabina. She said 12%. So that means that if you've got somebody who you know needs CPR and you try, you could be the world's best at CPR. 9 times out of 10 you'll fail. Why would you try? Sorry, I'm very passionate about this subject, and the lifeboat thing is kind of bringing it out. There are 3 reasons why you try and do CPR on somebody. 1, so that you can go to bed that night knowing that you tried. It's no bigger than that. It's no more important than that. It's that peace of mind in yourself. You've had no greater repercussion than that. 2, so that the family of the casualty that you are trying to save, who are standing on the shore, because we lived very close to chaotic water and frequently people could see you from the shore, the family standing on the shore are allowed to believe that hope is not lost. They can see that you tried. Even if it all goes to shit, they know that you tried. And 3, statistics are all very well and good, but in the moment, in the reality of the situation, they don't matter. Because if you try, you may only have a 12% chance of saving a life. If you don't, 100% they're going to die. 100% they're going to die if we do nothing. And it is the same with the earth. Oh, I'd be mean if I left you there. Oh, I'd be so mean. And we're not really supposed to be plugging our own wares on this stage, but I'm going to, because I'm really passionate about this. What we've built at Practice Building over the last 12 months is called the Net Zero Optics program. And it is simple. Oh, is it simple? It is guided by the science as frequently as it is published, and it is spectacularly affordable. And I'm not going to shy away from the fact that it is the most ambitious program of its kind, because we're paying homage and implementing principles like the polluter pays and net gain principles, which are at the moment only hypothetical pillars of a sustainable society. It's what the best and brightest thinkers in the world are saying we need in the future to be legally mandated to the populace, but they are not legally implemented anywhere in the world right now. So we're taking matters into our own hands a little bit and making the world a better place starting today. And what it means is that for any practice on the program, you can get to certified net zero status, fully carbon offset, and then some, without it affecting your bottom line, in as little as 90 days. Now, if I'm honest, we could do that in an afternoon if I had the data that I need from you and we had that much time available in your diary. But as urgent as this situation is, you can have 90 days, even you, Fiona. And that's just the beginning. That's just the beginning, because we'll be, on a parallel to that, we're running a waste management and plastic management program, meaning that you can achieve a net zero plastic certification in the same amount of time, because we all know that this industry is awash with plastic and we've got to do something about it. And then we start talking about the rest of sustainability, about the bigger picture, about the 17 Sustainable Development Goals as outlined by the United Nations. Now, these are the goals, the areas on which we all need to work as outlined by the UN. These are the things that will create a truly sustainable world. And they're tremendously diverse. I mean, climate action is one of them, but there's life below water, there's reduced inequalities, there's infrastructure and innovation, there's gender equality, as well as clean water and sanitation, no poverty. It's all there. I'm starting on climate action. Why? Because that is the biggest challenge, and if we do nothing about that, we won't have the luxury to address the rest of them. And the lovely thing is, once we tackle that existential threat to any one of us, that gives you the breathing room to work on the rest of the stuff. So what you're going to do now, that's the key thing, I need action. We all need action. We collectively need us all to act together. So the OSA have this program going on, Abdo have a different sustainability program going on, we have the net zero program going on, and they all work together. They're not mutually exclusive. They work together well in synergy. You can tackle the problem from many different angles all at once. We're on stand D33. Come and talk to us about offsetting or calculating and offsetting your practice's carbon footprint. And on the way, ask somebody the dirty question of what is your carbon footprint, good sir? I'm not actually asking you. Because we feel like that, it feels like that should be a dirty question. It feels like it should be a rude question to say to somebody, what's your carbon footprint? And I think that's because we know that people probably don't know, and we don't want to make people feel uncomfortable. Because people kind of know they should know their carbon footprint, and they don't. That's people, that's businesses as well. It's so profoundly important to start getting a handle on that. And you could ask this, and you could be right about it, but that's not going to save the world. What that question needs to become is an olive branch, so that we can start working together. And you say, oh, you don't know your carbon footprint yet? That's okay. Here's a directory of some really useful tools to get a handle on your carbon footprint. Here's the means to start reducing and make a reductions plan. And here's the means to offset it. And we're all on the same team. Here's some other good ideas too. Let's do all this together, because fundamentally, not one of us here has a fucking chance of saving the world alone. But if this entire industry gets on board and we can all help it do that, that's the only chance that we have of saving the fucking world. Any questions? You can applaud if you like, it's very kind of you.